I interviewed an 80-year-old woman that lives with her 81-year-old husband in Bellflower, California. I was lucky to find this dynamic and resilient woman through a family friend. In this presentation, I will take you on a journey through the life that she described to me, from her upbringing as an Italian immigrant on the farms of Copperfield, Utah, to her attitudes about life and living. Linda, as I will call her, appeared to have a mentally healthy outlook on her life, from reflecting on her playful adventures in childhood to coping with devastating losses in family and children. Linda's parents immigrated from Italy in 1921. Her parents arrived on a boat to Ellis Island in New York City. Their names are still engraved on the American Immigrant Wall of Honor. Linda was born in 1931 in Copperfield, Utah. When she was 6 years old, she moved to Union, Utah, where she lived until she was 19 years old. Linda was one of 13 children. There were 10 boys and 3 girls in her family, and she was the middle child of the bunch, as well as the middle child of the 3 girls. Most of the memories that Linda recalled as a child were pleasant, playful, and happy. She describes life working on a farm, but to her it was not work. It was fun. It was time for the family to play together. She and the family never thought anything of the manual labor. They just did it. Linda remembered having a good relationship with both her parents. She remembers her mother working very hard. Mom got up at 4 a.m. every day to start daily chores. A couple of her brothers owned 2 good shirts, and Mom would take the time to wash and iron them every morning. Mom would bake 13 loaves of bread a week for the large family. Since they lived and worked on a farm, they were pretty self-sufficient. They raised everything they ate. Linda recalls she and her sister killing and skinning rabbits and gathering eggs to eat. She recalls the family eating dinner together every night after Dad had worked all day in the copper mines. It was not uncommon to converse about the day over a beer with a raw egg or drinking coffee and cake, even at a very young age. Linda remembers running errands with Dad. They would go to town and buy supplies for the house. She also remembers buying her first bra with her dad, which was not uncommon as her mom had to stay home with the rest of her 12 siblings. Linda knew at an early age that she wanted to live in California. Since she was 8 years old, she dreamed of moving there. Why? She wanted to live in the sun and never wanted to have to shovel snow again. 11 years later, at the age of 19, she married her husband, John, whom she met at her brother's wedding. After living on military bases in Washington State and Korea for 5 years, her dream came true as she moved to Bellflower, California. During my interview with Linda, she told me that she considered John the single most important person in her life. This was very evident through their interaction at home. John is currently suffering through the earlier stages of Parkinson's disease and is confined to a wheelchair. He needs consistent care and attention. I observed that he is self-sufficient in feeding himself. However, I can imagine that he probably needs care in his activities of daily living. Linda's daughter and son-in-law were caring for John while I was conducting the interview. At one point, Linda stopped the interview to administer some oral medication to John. The way she handled and cared for him during this interaction was nothing remarkable in terms of how she did it, but the closeness, intimacy, and history of their lives was very apparent as her nurturing to his needs seemed like second nature to her. Linda and John raised 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. Parenting came easy to Linda as she had 4 younger brothers and a younger sister growing up. She had experience. Much of her life is filled with happy memories. However, there have been some times of difficulty and sadness. Linda grew up Italian and Catholic in a primarily Mormon neighborhood just south of Salt Lake City. Linda said that being Italian and Catholic was next to being black. You went to school with all Mormons. All the teachers were Mormon. You were set up not to excel the way everybody else did. You were not accepted. Most teachers were okay, but some were very rude, mean, and prejudiced. Other sadness that occurred happened in her family life. She had a baby brother that was born one evening and died the next morning. 6 months later, her older sister died from rheumatic fever. Over the last few years, 5 of her brothers have died. Also, her youngest son died when he was 42 years old. She was 70 years old at the time. Linda always said, "You just don't brew over these things. You don't brew over it for the rest of your life." She also said that it was God's way. God's got a plan. Linda's attitude towards her life can be summed up in a positive manner. Her recollection of her life focused primarily on her childhood, drawing upon positive and happy memories. Difficult situations and circumstances were also described with an optimistic point of view, as though it were a learning experience rather than a setback that prevented her from growing. In regards to human behavior and social environment theories, Linda's case can be applied to many theories. For this presentation, Erikson's theory on psychosocial crises can sum up Linda fairly well. In Erikson's final stage of the psychosocial crises, seniors question, "Have I lived a full life?" and are in battle between ego integrity and despair. Linda's recollection of her life pointed to a rich history with colorful experiences, thoughtful purpose, and abundant meaning, which indicates ego integrity. However, when posed with the question, "Would you live life over again?" I was surprised to hear her say yes. When asked why she would want to live life over again, it was not because she wanted to repave any cracks in her life path or repair any bridges, but because it was fun and I would love to do it all over again. This interview was a joy to conduct. It allowed me to gain perspective on another person's history and life, and allowed me to probe and gather information that I would not normally have been able to do in a normal day-to-day conversation. I was fortunate to find an interview subject that was willing to share her experiences in an open manner, and I'm even luckier to have found an individual with such a realistically optimistic viewpoint on life.